Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum, and Chris Early, otherwise known as Duke, very good friend of the show, very good friend of mine. How are you today, gentlemen?
Doing good, Louis. Doing good.
Yeah, doing good.
All right, so got a lot to talk about. It's been a while since we've had a show, and training camp, since I've been going out there reporting every day that has been available for open to the public. I've been a little busy, so that's why we haven't had a show. But we have one now with the day off, so I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and kind of give my my brief report here. So let's just get right into it. So the first thing that I've noticed is that Ryan Tannehill and Matt Moore seem to be still having this idea of two different philosophies in offense. Matt Moore is aggressive and makes a lot of mistakes. Ryan Tannehill is conservative and does not make many mistakes, but like, quite frankly, if I had to pick a word for it, it has been boring. Has it been bad? No, he hasn't been making mistakes, but he hasn't exactly been all that exciting. So maybe my earlier frustrations on Twitter had a lot to do with just how boring it looks. It looks bland. It looks short passes to Landry, short passes to Ajayi that don't really go anywhere, short passes here, short passes there. Yeah, it's boring. Will it work in games? I don't know. We'll find that out, I guess. Maybe it's different versions of short passing and different route combinations. Like Duke always tells me, like route combinations, execution of getting off press coverage, all of that stuff that I'm not very good at judging when I'm doing play-by-play. That's why I wish he was down here to take a look at it. That's a hint for next year, Mr. Early. So, let's see, what else? Oh, yeah, Arian Foster looking pretty good. I'm actually surprised that he looks as good as he did. The word I would have used to describe him up until a couple of practices ago would have been smooth. He didn't look explosive or super fast or anything. He didn't really look like Arian Foster of old. He just looked like a vintage. No, vintage is the wrong word for it. He looked like an older version, a more an aged version of Arian Foster. Still good, but nothing special. And then recently he started doing more Arian Foster-like things, and he started making excellent cuts. He got some good acceleration. He still catches the ball pretty well. So if he can continue doing that, then he may just wind up being the starter like Ron Kniff, another friend of ours on the show and a fellow PhinManiacs writer. He predicted a long time ago, and that would be in direct contradiction with a different prediction that Tom Shannon, also of PhinManiacs, wrote up, that Arian Foster wouldn't even make the roster. So so far, Ron's in the lead on that one. And let's see. Defense. Cameron Wake looks like he's ready to go. Ndamukong Suh still doing Ndamukong Suh things. And we've got Andre Branch actually being a surprise here. Andre Branch is actually doing a lot better than I thought he would, and I think he's doing a lot better than most people expected. They didn't expect to see somebody able to get into the backfield so easily. They didn't expect to see somebody who would be pushing for a starting spot. Of course, like off the record, or excuse me, on the record, it's Cameron Wake's spot, and it always will be. But I get the feeling that Andre Branch is going to get a lot of playtime with Cameron Wake being used as a pass rush specialist. So, and I wouldn't be too upset if Branch did wind up taking a lot of snaps, because from what I've seen of him, he's able to get in the backfield pretty consistently, even as a pass rusher. And I'm happy with what we've got from Andre Branch. I didn't think he's going to be that good, but he's doing pretty well. So let's see. Jarvis Landry's doing Jarvis Landry things. Jordan Cameron still isn't that good with Ryan Tannehill, and that's no surprise. They don't seem to have the same chemistry that Tannehill had with Charles Clay. I don't know why, but whatever. And if this sounds all incredibly simplistic, that's because it is. It is incredibly simplistic. Training camp brings a certain amount. It quenches the thirst for football a little bit, and the preseason tomorrow is going to do it a little bit more. But true evaluation is very hard to do in training camp, and I can only report what it is that I have seen, and this is just what I'm going off right off of the top of my head here. Once you spend the next like 10 days just sitting out there, things kind of tend to blur, and everything kind of feels the same. The scrimmage was not a happy thing to see. We were out there for the Miami Dolphins Web Weekend Training Camp Edition, and the offense was pretty miserable the whole way through. And then just the last practice, Matt Moore was able to march down the field against the starting defense, while Tannehill couldn't get past the second-team defense. That really bothered me, and I'm sorry for anybody who still likes Tannehill as much as they do. I still like him too, but I'm starting to waver just because, like, I know it's just practice, but the fact that Moore made it look so easy against the starters while Tannehill struggled against the backups, that just bugs me. It and it should bug you. That should be a red flag that Tannehill couldn't get past the backups when Moore made it look easy against the starters. I'm sorry. Even if it is just one drive, one practice, one whatever, the fact remains he did it. Am I calling for Moore to be the starter? Heck no. I'm well aware of the Matt Moore syndrome. He's either going to be really good or he's going to be really bad, and I don't want to roll the dice on that sort of thing. So, uh, well, that's my very simple, very quick report of what's going on at training camp. There aren't really a whole lot of standouts. Jakeem Grant is very up and down. He has amazing ability once he has the ball. His problem is actually having the ball. He seems to be working on that a little bit more, though. Leonte Carew is kind of up and down. He's making good catches, but he's also kind of moving a little bit like molasses, probably trying to still figure out the scheme a little bit. So he's having on and off days as well. So I'm going to put the ball in your court. You guys have been keeping up with my tweets. You guys have been keeping up with all the reports coming out of camp from everybody else. So let's see. Chad, since you just got back from wherever it was you were, let's go ahead and get started with you here. What do you think about training camp and anything that really sticks out in your mind?
Well, I personally think people are overreacting a little bit on the offensive side of the football. It's a new coach. It's going to be a new system, and so there's a lot of learning going on. And so I think people, they want to see all these big plays, but it's much more important that the receivers are understanding where they're supposed to go and the quarterback's understanding where he's supposed to go with his progressions and things of those nature. And so I'm not too worried right now because there's no live bullets. And so we'll get to see a little more in the preseason game, the third preseason game, the one in which I think that the starters play the full half. If Tannehill's really struggling in that game, that would be a little more cause for concern for me. But other than that, I'm not going to worry about it too much. I like the look of what we have on offense. I think right now people are underestimating how good our wide receiving core is. I think we have an exceptional wide receiving core right now. Jarvis Landry, as always, is very special. Devontae Parker, when he's in there, he is giving us finally that downfield element. I think he's really coming along well from everything I've read and seen in terms of footage and stuff from training camp. And I like Carew. I think Crew's going to be just fine. And whether Kenny Stills plays more Crews, we got four good receivers right away, and even past that, where is Jakeem Grant going to fit in? Is Matt Hazel going to make a comeback in the preseason? Even somebody like Griff Whalen, who appears to have a good rapport with Ryan Tannehill. I think we've got a good wide receiving core. I absolutely think Arian Foster is going to make the team, and I think he will probably be the starting back, but I'm not really worried. I don't think Arian Foster physically can hold up for 20 carries a game, and I don't believe Jay Ajayi can hold up for 20 carries a game. So I think you're going to see both of those guys splitting carries regardless of who's the guy that is in the first play. But I feel pretty good about them. The offensive line's coming along all right. I think the only real battle left, unless there's a dramatic change, is between Tunzel and Dallas Thomas, and I think everybody agrees with me. We're hoping Tunzel wins that battle. But as I said the podcast a few weeks ago, people need to understand Tunzel wasn't drafted to be a great guard. I don't expect him to come in and just be a Pro Bowl guard. He's going to be our Pro Bowl left tackle. And from the limited times he gets in there, everything I'm reading says he looks pretty good at left tackle. So that's a much harder position to fill. So whether he wins that guard battle or not, I think is going to be irrelevant long term with the team. On the defensive side of the ball, despite everybody talking about offense, I'm much more concerned.
I think we lost Chad here. He suddenly disappeared on us. Well then, while we get him back, Duke, any thoughts?
Just kind of echo what he says, and I think there's a lot of reaction. I think there's some, it's just hard to tell because we don't really know what's being actually called out there. We don't know what's being run, what's being practiced, and that's the key thing. And with practice, they're working on concepts. They're not working on. I mean, you want to beat the defense. The defense wants to beat the offense, but that's not your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal is in practice, is to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing correctly. even if you throw interception or if incomplete passes or things like that, that's okay because the purpose is it's teaching. The games where things need to, where the word needs to show up, and so I'm not overly concerned with the route calling. I'm not concerned with the throws that are being made. It all depends on Gase came out and said that the offense was light years ahead of where they were in the scrimmage. He was fine with what was going on. He said he's fine with where Tannehill is, and I'm cool with that because I mean, it's one thing if he's making bad decisions. What was the most, I guess, concerning thing that I read was that I think it was Armando said that he just looks like he's processing things slow. He's not being quick about his decisions, and that's probably a product of just not being new to the system, not trying to learn, make sure everybody's on the same page. And it's probably not that he's not knowing where to go with the ball, it's that he doesn't, I don't know, have a feel for the receivers having that spot. So it's just stuff that needs to get worked out. Tomorrow, what you'll see, I think, is you'll see they're not going to game plan for this game, but they're going to run their plays. And I think you're going to see the offense. I don't think it's going to look like what it will look in the regular season, but you'll see a good portion of that. And I think it'll be stuff like I've been watching games tonight, and you see some guys take some shots downfield, but for the most part, it's it's same old NFL. You run the ball, run certain routes, you run patterns. I mean, it just bothers me that people getting upset when let's say Ryan Tannehill hits Jarvis Landry on a slant. And people are like, well, he's looking for Landry or he's throwing short. Well, I mean, these are route concepts. You don't run a 15-yard slant. You don't run 9 routes every time. It just seems like that. It seems like I just don't understand what a lot of these fans, their process perception of what they think the offense should be like. I mean, it's not dropping 7-step drops and throwing deep all the time. Yeah, you need to see some deeper passes in there, but
well, that's what I mean, Duke. I know what you're saying. I know exactly what it is you're saying, and you do have a point. But I fancy myself a rather objective somebody who watches these guys, and I've been out there every day, and you've seen my tweets. I've tweeted you direct messaging pretty much the last week or so, just telling you what I've been thinking. And I don't care if I don't need him to chuck the ball 30 yards downfield. I don't need him to chuck the ball 20 yards downfield. Just stop throwing it in. It's like I can predict where he's going to throw it before he throws it. And 90% of the time, I'm right about where he throws it. And if somebody who's watching from the stands, can predict where Tannehill is going to throw it and be right, that's a problem, because if I can figure it out, there is no way that defenses who spend their whole lives studying this stuff can't figure it out. And if that happens, then the Dolphins are predictable. I can predict what's happening. There's no way the defenses can't.
And I mean, that's the kind of stuff, though, that I believe will change once they actually start game planning. Because they're not game planning against their own defense right now. They're not going back in the film room and watching how to break down what Vance Joseph is doing. They're breaking down, all right, this, in the wide receiver room, Sean Jefferson showing other guys, all right, this is on this route, this is what you need to be doing. What's your release on this route? Watch what you're doing here. In the quarterback room, they're saying, all right, now this is the defensive look that they gave you. Here's your hot read. You should have checked for that, or you checked your hot read. Whatever. Just that's what they're going over. And probably by training camp ends, next week, and then practices will be closed to the media. So at that point, once you get into, I'd say after next week, once they kind of get a feel for filling out the last part of the roster. Then they're going to start looking at Seattle. And I'm going to say, oh, this is what Seattle does. This is what their defense looks like. Here's what the plays we're going to design to do this. That's, you know, if Tannehill's constantly throwing short routes and checking down after that point, then that would be a cause for concern. I think someone tweeted today or yesterday that, you know, in 2012 when they drafted Tannehill, there was a lot of times he took sacks because he would stand and wait in the pocket for a bigger play to develop when he could have checked down. And people were complaining that he wasn't checking down enough. Now it's reversed. And so, you know, it just depends on what they're trying to practice. And granted, you can't really trust what the coaches are saying all the time because they're not going to come out and say, and Gase has been pretty forthcoming, but he's not going to come out and say, yeah, Tannehill's not doing what we're telling him to do. I mean, he knows better than to cause a storm like that. So he may just be covering. But then again, I mean, Tannehill doesn't seem like the kind that would just not take the coaching. I mean, if there was one thing about Tannehill, I think I discussed this with you through direct messaging, was the problem I had with Tannehill is that he's a nice guy. He's a good student in class. You give him an assignment, he does his assignment. He may even go above and beyond to do that assignment, but he doesn't. He needs the bad boy mentality where he walks out on the field and he says, forget this, I'm doing it my way. This is what we're doing. When that happens, he'll become the franchise quarterback. But the reason I have faith in what Gase is doing, because Gase doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's got this reputation of building quarterbacks. And he's going to go in that quarterback room and he's going to say, listen, I'm tired of you checking down. I'm tired of you throwing to Jarvis Landry. Look deeper down the field. And Tannehill is like, no, I'm not doing that. It just everything we know about those people, those personalities, it does not click. I mean, knowing what I know about Ryan Tannehill, just from seeing from interviews and things like that, what people said about him, if Gase went in and said, look, I want you to throw deep on every route this time. He said, unless you're being chased from the pocket, throw it deep. Ryan Tannehill would go out there and do it. He's not going to say no. He's not going to check it down just because that's the safe thing to do if he was told otherwise. And I can't imagine Gase going in there and saying, yeah, we're fine with that. So, you know, to me it is, they're working on something. We don't know exactly what it is. We'll figure it out, you know, when the games start. And, you know, I tweeted a little bit ago that I said, if I was Adam Gase, the first play I would call tomorrow night would be max protects, play action, 9 that. Just do it, and if it connects, just look up there at the press box, kind of like, see, I told you. And but my guess is the first play tomorrow night's going to be a run play. But if I would love to see the other, just because that seems like something that he would do. But you know, so again, I'm not worried about that. I haven't heard much about the defense other than the defensive line was eating a lot. You kind of expect that, but again, that was the same way last year. And it was that way through the preseason. I mean, you and I both saw it down in Carolina. I don't know what the coaches said, but you could tell from the difference between day 2 and day 1 of the intensity. And Carolina was struggling. They were struggling against Miami defensive front. The third preseason game against the Falcons. You know, usually these starters play into the third quarter. They took Matt Ryan out early because he was getting manhandled by the defensive line. I mean, it was like, yeah, we're going to do this thing. And then week 1, Washington just, you know, 1 sack from Jordan Phillips, no pressure. They ran all over us. Kirk Cousins, you know, he does what he does. I mean, it was like everything we'd learned from preseason was all false. So, you know.
So are you saying that if we suck in the preseason, that means we're gonna go 10-6 in the regular season?
No, I'm just saying I'm not buying into anything anything about the preseason. I'm going to enjoy it for what it is. I want to see, I want to see good plays. I'm mainly going to watch run blocking. Last preseason, run blocking was an issue. I watched that Carolina. I was down there at Carolina. I watched that game several times. They did not look good running the ball. I think Tannehill had like an 11-yard run, but otherwise the starters did not do much on the ground. It's been that way all preseason, and that's how it was during the regular season. Run blocking is not something you can really hide in preseason. Pass blocking, well, you can get away with it. I mean, in 2013, Jonathan Martin was starting at left tackle, and he was all right in preseason. I mean, he thought, hey, this might work. And then he was a disaster in the regular season at left tackle. And so last season, Dallas Thomas looked, adequate at guard.
Yeah, I was fooled by that.
He turned the corner, and then this regular season it didn't happen. Run blocking is a different story. Run blocking is, they're going to run the zone, so it's going to kind of look the same as what we've been seeing, but it's going as far as technique-wise. But that's what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of, that's to me where you can judge it the best is can they get pushed? Is Jay Ajayi having to work for 3 yards, or is he getting 3 yards and then getting hit and falling forward and getting 5 or 6 yards? That's what I want to see. I don't care about Tannehill audibling. I don't care about necessarily his decision making, because again, they're not game planning, and it's going to be pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, they're going to come out and base defenses. They're not going to throw some convoluted, fancy defensive scheme. They're going to come out with cover 2, cover 1, basic stuff. And Gase is going to call the play, and Tannehill says, "Oh, they're running this play. They're running this coverage. Let's run this play." And that's they're testing stuff. What I want to see is when they decide to run the ball, I want to see the guards get their guy off the line of scrimmage. I want to see the tackles seal where they need to seal. I want to see guys getting to the second level. And if that happens, I will feel much better about the entire offense. Just because. Okay. Defense, I want to see the exact opposite. I want to see the defensive front. I want to see them. I don't care about pass rushing because, they may not have their starting guys over. Somebody may be hurt or maybe arresting him or something. I want to see, especially if they're going to use this wide scheme, this wide front, I want to see the linebackers slow the ball. I want to see them get off blocks. I want to see the defensive tackles get penetration. If they're being double teamed, if Jordan Phillips is playing the one tech and he's getting doubled, I want to see him stand his ground at the point of attack. So really, if you're watching preseason, in my opinion, watch the offensive line. They're going to tell you a lot more than anything else will. I mean, really, does it matter if Tannehill throws 2 touchdowns or 2 interceptions tomorrow night? No, I mean, absolutely nothing.
But they'll explode.
Oh yeah, Twitter will erupt, and then there'll be a few that are like, oh, this is terrible. There'll be some that'll be, oh, just chill out.
Well,
if Dallas Thomas gets in there tomorrow night, and let's see, I don't know who their defensive tackles are, but he gets up there and they run a zone play. They run the zone read, and he gets his guy and pushes him, clears out, and gets to the second level, and he does that consistently while he's in the game.
I still won't buy it.
I won't buy it, but that would say more to me than if Tannehill got up there and threw an 80-yard touchdown that was perfectly on stride. I mean, it's about learning. That's what these guys are doing, and that's why they're working on stuff. And now they're getting to hit somebody else for a change.
Hallelujah.
And so, yeah, I mean, this is going to be, and you're going to come back next week. They're going to come back after their own practice, and, it's going to be the same old stuff. And it's just because they're working on things that they're working on their concepts. Now they're going to put a little bit of that into practice. By week 3, they'll have it they'll have kind of their concepts that they're going for. Week 4 is tryouts for the fringe guys, and that's when they'll start game planning. So the funny part is all the good stuff that's going to happen that will be fun to pay attention to is going to happen away from the media.
Well, Chad, welcome back. I don't know what happened to your internet there.
Yeah, sorry, cut out on me, but I'm back up and running. Hallelujah.
All right, so we apparently switched over to the preseason preview. Any thoughts on what Duke talked about?
Well, to touch on things, I mentioned I thought there was an overreaction on offense. They're behind this year, and again, they're installing a new offense. And I'm just keeping in mind, I thought the play calling was the worst I've ever seen last year, and they were still 6-10. I think Gase's play calling alone is going to increase the productivity of the offense, and I'm really not that worried about it right now. Defensively, I'm really worried. Even though you're seeing a different story in the performance in camp, it's not shocking that a veteran defensive line that features Mario Williams, Ndamukong Suh, Cameron Wake, Branch, these guys are all veteran players, have been in the league for a long time. So it doesn't shock me they're performing well. I'm really nervous about our corners, and I know you've written some on it, Lewis, but you can say what you want, you can think what you want, but the reality is the Dolphins are in serious trouble at cornerback, and I think it's people just need to be aware of that, and that it's going to be a rough year unless some really unlikely things happen. Right now, we don't have a number 2 corner. We've been signing people off the street practically, and that's a very telling sign for a football team when you're into training camp and they're just signing in these veterans to try to come in and fill spots in the corner because they have a problem. And I don't know what to think right now if Byron Maxwell gets hurt for the Dolphins. I mean, he's really the only legitimate boundary corner we have, and so we're hoping Xavier Howard's going to be good, but cornerback's tough to play as your whole rookie year. It's a difficult position to learn. It's extremely difficult to learn how to jam, not get flagged for penalties, which are getting called more than ever when we're trying to run the press, and to think we can have a player like Xavier Howard's miss as much as he's probably going to miss in training camp, and think we're going to just start him and think he's not going to get roasted. I mean that's wishful thinking. Tony Lippett, that they've been trying. I like Tony Lippett. I think he's talented, but
He's not ready for the role.
he isn't ready, and you're seeing them in practice wanting to try other people in front of him because he's struggling, and whoever they've brought in has either got hurt or isn't any better than Lippett, and so it makes me very nervous how our secondary is going to hold up, because not only I'm concerned about our starting talent, I'm concerned about our depth, and I'm glad they signed Chris Culver. I hope he can return to be healthy, because at least he's a proven commodity. When healthy, you can feel like you can stick in a game. And I had tweeted that a few days ago that at least we've got a veteran cornerback on the roster, because a lot of people were calling for Leon Hall.
And Antonio Cromartie.
Yeah, and not that I like those guys, but their response was to Culver was, well, this is another Dimitri Patterson or another Bryce McCain. And my comment back was, Dimitri Patterson and Bryce McCain are going to sound really good if Byron Maxwell gets hurt. Trust me. And so that's my concern right now is we have problems in the secondary. Linebacker, I'm worried about too. We're still signing the guys off the street, and I like our starting 3 linebackers right now, but I don't like our depth at all. And I don't know who our backup outside linebacker is right now. I don't know who our backup middle linebacker is right now, and I feel somewhat confident that Neville Hewitt can back up the weak side, but again, if Alonso gets hurt, who has an injury history, or if Misi gets hurt, who has an injury history, suddenly we're back again at bad linebacker talent. And so we better hope our defensive line is just dominating football games, because behind them we got some serious question marks. So despite everybody being worried about Ryan Tannehill right now and everybody be worried about our offense, I really am much more concerned about our defense going through a full season.
Yeah, what you're talking about is essentially that you're not falling for the sky is falling offense. So I'll admit, I'll be the first to admit that my reporting is mostly based on the quarterbacks because that's what I see most of the time. When I'm doing my play-by-play, I kind of have to keep an eye on where Tannehill's throwing, who he's throwing to, and I can't even. And from my angle down there on the bleachers, I can't even see where the yardage is very well. So all I can kind of give is a general idea of, oh, he threw short pass, oh, he threw intermediate pass, oh, look, he threw a deep pass. I can't give yardage from there because I can't see the hash marks from where I am. So
And the funny thing about that is, I think it was yesterday's practice that whatever they were running, Tannehill does something. He throws a pass. And between three different people, it went between 6 and 15 yards.
yes, that was that's also my fault.
I don't know how you miss. I mean, 8 to 10 yards short, 6 to 15 yards. That's not possible. That's an entire first down. Who missed that? One person said 6. I think you came in and said it was about 9 or 10, and then somebody said 15. I was like, how is this? What's going on here? So to me, when you're watching something like that, it's kind of, if especially for the fans who are following this on Twitter, it's kind of like, you don't necessarily have to be accurate with it, but when you start tweeting out stuff like that and then you're getting all this conflicting information, how do you interpret that? One is a short pass that people complain about. One's a 15-yard intermediate pass that no one would complain about, which is it. So, but I understand, anybody who's watched training camp could tell you that it's difficult to keep up with the pace of it. And especially if you're trying to tweet it out. So, I will say I will commend you for doing that because it is difficult to pay attention and type at the same time.
It was a little easier when Max was in town, but now that he's back in California, I'm kind of running on my own again. So, and I try my best, I really do. But I wish I could. I wish there was another me sitting next to me so that I could catch everything. And I didn't forget the lessons you gave me, Duke. Because I said I can't read that far into it and still give the play-by-play.
Well, see, and what you're talking about there, if you haven't told anyone, is that I was wanting to watch. I wanted you to watch how the receivers come off the ball, particularly Devontae Parker. And of course, he's been out the whole time, so you haven't got to see much of that anyway. But when they're lining up, I wanted to see if he's lining up in the slot, if he's lining up against the press, how he's doing this, because I just wanted to see kind of how he gets off that jam. That was an issue that he had. I don't think it's a problem for Landry, and that was one good thing about Carew is that he kind of knows how to get off the jam. It's all about winning at the line of scrimmage for the receivers, and that's I think a lot of football fans in general just miss that. They don't see everything that goes on, all the technique that goes into a guy getting open at the line of scrimmage. And if you're a Dolphins fan, you've watched the receivers get open at will against our corners and they're playing 7 to 10 yards deep. It's one thing, but when a guy, week one, somebody's going to be lining up across Richard Sherman, and there's a technique, there's ways to get away from the guy going to be up in his face like that, and that's what I want. That's the kind of stuff I would like to watch at practice. And what you're doing with the play-by-play, you can't do that because you cannot sit here and try to tweet, this is what just happened, when you're watching one guy do one thing.
Yeah, I get you, man. I get you. I wish I could watch that closely in practice, but with the play-by-play, it's like I can really only say Tannehill handed off to this guy, and maybe if I'm lucky, I'll be able to spot who was covering him and maybe who did a good blocking assignment. And there are going to be discrepancies. Like everybody who ever follows the training camps on Twitter, there are going to be discrepancies because we don't see everything. And I know a lot of people don't like a lot of the beat writers there, but a lot of them are pretty good at the whole tweeting thing, including the person that we don't like. If he was a little less snarky with his tweets on top of it, then maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But he is good at tweeting what happens. The extra commentary is unneeded, but he's good at tweeting what happens.
I want to hit on a point that Chad mentioned, and he's absolutely right that Xavier Howard, he's going to get beat. He's going to start week 1. Just plan on it. I mean, they're signing guys off the street. He's starting week 1 because of that. Kevin wrote a post, I think it was after the first week, who's winners and losers in first week of training camp, and he had Xavier Howard as a loser, and I commented, well, no, actually, he's a winner because nobody's standing out to the point that he's going to walk right in and just start simply because he's the best talent they've got, even if he's not proven it. But he was going to get beat. But I'm glad they're not doing what the previous regime did in that Gase doesn't really have anything to lose by starting him. He knows he's going to get beat. He knows it's going to be trouble. The previous regime seemed like they wanted to cover themselves, and they would get these veterans. And I know, Lewis, you and I have argued before about the Cortland Finnegan deal, but I didn't have a problem with him being on the team as much as I did not want him starting. That was Jamar Taylor's spot. Jamar Taylor needed those snaps. And it was like, well, he didn't necessarily win it outright in camp, and that's cool and all, but he shouldn't have had to compete necessarily against some guy they just signed that year. I mean, he was drafted for that position. They should have let him have it, and then let him lose it, I guess, so to speak. In this case, I don't think they're going to have that problem. I don't think Culliver is a guy that they're going to say, well, if they're both Howard, Culliver's going to start because he's a veteran. I think Xavier Howard is going to get that, and he's only coming out if he's so bad that they need somebody else to step in. So I'm kind of okay with that situation because Howard and Maxwell were the guys that after the draft you expected those were going to be your 2 starting corners at the beginning of the season. And that's what I think it will be. And I think Culliver's a good signing because he's now depth on the outside. Before you had Tony Lippett, and that was about it. Now you've got Lippett, who will probably be the number 4 corner. Culliver will be the guy coming off the bench if somebody needs a break or something like that. And I'm glad to be hearing about Michael Thomas getting starting reps in the slot as the nickel guy. That's intriguing. I know McCain's had some injuries and stuff, but
no, Bobby's been fine since he came off the PUP list. He just lost the job, which actually bothers me instead.
Well, I don't have a problem with it because number one is Michael Thomas is still a young player. I mean, he's not necessarily.
Well, he's young-ish. He's not a spring chicken.
I mean, he's 26, so he's not an old guy, but he doesn't have a lot of experience. So he's still a developing guy, and I think he's a talented player.
He is.
He's my second favorite player on the Dolphins. Just his whole story about how he got to the Dolphins, the play he made. To win the game.
Yeah, he's forever in Dolphins lore because of that.
And now he's worked his way into essentially a starting role, and can play multiple positions. He's the new kind of Jimmy Wilson player that can play safety or play the nickel spot. So I'm okay with him in that role, and I think they're going to both him and McCain are going to get plenty of snaps because there'll be the dime packages and and they'll move Thomas back there to safety some. So I'm okay kind of with the cornerback starting positions. I think the Culliver signing kind of eases some questions about depth. Now, he may not come in and be great by any means, but I think he's going to give you what you need if Because you expected Howard to start, so if Maxwell goes down, now you've got Culliver to come in, who's a veteran that can start alongside Howard. So the problem would be is if Howard doesn't get that spot, and that's the problem. But I don't see that happening. I don't see anybody on the team that's right now that's going to take it away.
I think it's again there's a lot of wishful thinking going on. Again, Xavier Howard has not even been in training camp, and he has an unknown time frame when to return. And I think it's absolutely insane to think you can bring a guy out of college, have him hardly play any of training camp or preseason. If he's back soon, it has to be real soon. If we getting into 2 games or 3 games into the preseason, and we're going to throw him out there on opening day, he's just going to get shredded. And I don't know that you can start him without giving him enough time to learn the position. I know he's talented, but I mean that I just can't think going through history where you could take a rookie corner, start him on opening day, and have him miss a significant portion of training camp. Culver to me is complete desperation. They don't have any depth right now at corner, and from what I'm reading, I don't even know if Culver is going to be available until week 6. I mean, they're talking about him opening the season on the pup, and so I don't know what's wrong with him. But physically, there's different versions going around about how healthy he is, and so they just desperately need depth because, again, if Byron Maxwell is healthy, you can do some things schematically. They can try to use the safeties to help protect somebody like Xavier Howard or Tony Lippett, whoever is on the other side. But if Byron Maxwell gets hurt, this team is completely desperate at corner, and we're clearly playing a defense that's going to be predicated on attacking the quarterback and playing a lot of press coverage, which is something the NFL wants to really, really regulate, with flags. And so expect a lot of yellow flags on the field for holding because young corners that have not played a lot tend to grab receivers in press coverage, if our defense is not able to dominate a game. And so to me, if you watch the signings right now, the team is in panic mode right now to try to get some help at corner because there's probably not a clear timetable on when Xavier Howard's going to be ready, which means they don't have a clear feeling if they're going to be able to get him ready. Tony Lippett's struggling in practice, and they don't really have any other good options right now. And so it becomes really bleak if Maxwell were to get hurt. So if things fall into place, Xavier Howard will pick things up quickly as a rookie, and he'll be able to at least play adequately. Byron Maxwell will stay healthy at least before long enough for Culver to get back, learn the system, and be able to have another veteran cornerback we can stick in there because as we go in the NFL, it's a passing league. We're going to be playing some good quarterbacks this year. They're going to be licking their chops to attack our corners. And so it's definitely a concern. And again, as is linebacker, because we're starting all 3 linebackers have had injury troubles the last few years. And I just don't see the depth at the linebacker position either. And so, we get into week 2 or 3 and suddenly, Alonzo's hurt or Maxwell's hurt. We're going to have a defense that's really struggling. That's my opinion on what's going on. So I'm hoping that we get lucky, but again, this is not a good situation right now in the defensive backfield. And I know they're trying to not have a lot of light on that, but I think the team as we travel through the preseason and get into the regular season, it's going to become more and more apparent that the front office probably made some mistakes by not going out and maybe paying a veteran corner. And I understand that Brett Grimes had to go with the scheme and with all the baggage, but we probably should have spent some money and went and got another solid veteran corner. I think that's a mistake, and it's going to become more glaring, at least early in the season.
Well, it's not like they didn't try, Chad. I mean, the whole Pac-Man Jones thing, and then what was his name, Patrick Robinson, and they looked around. They just didn't want to pay a fortune for him.
Yeah, but I understand that. But what's the point of going into the season and trying to cut a few $1 million on your salary cap?
I mean, there's always the whole supposedly like this is supposed to be like their off the record stance. They inside they know that this is a rebuilding year. This isn't how it's gonna look. They keep saying all the right stuff like, oh, we're gonna go winning and oh, we're doing playoffs. And maybe Stephen Ross really does think he's gonna have a playoff team. Maybe he's really that disillusioned into believing that this team is playoff ready because like me being like I'm a Dolphins fan that's trying to become a reporter for the Dolphins. You guys are Dolphins fans. You guys have been watching this team for before I was even born, probably. So it's not like we're trying to say the Dolphins suck all the time. We don't roll like that. But anybody who thinks this team is playoff ready is insane. And I'm not trying to say that as knocking on Steve Ross because I had a guy in my DMs today telling me that Steve Ross is this, Steve Ross is that, Steve Ross is the reason the Dolphins suck, Steve Ross is an idiot, Steve Ross needs to go disappear somewhere. Look, he's done everything he can to try and build a winning football team. He's taken a money is no object stance on building a football team. He has never been afraid to open up his checkbook. He just spent I don't know how much. I don't even remember the actual number. What was it, $500 million or something on recreating Dolphin Stadium or whatever it's going to finally wind up being called, maybe Hard Rock Stadium. I don't know, but it's not like the only thing he's done wrong is that he can't find somebody who can build a good football team. He's giving it a shot with Tannenbaum now, and Tannenbaum did have Rex Ryan lead them to two straight championships with Mark Sanchez as their quarterback. I'm just gonna leave that out there. Nobody cares, but I'm gonna say it anyway. But Steve Ross has done everything he can, but this team is not ready, and I think the only one who seems to believe otherwise is him. And maybe that's because he's being lied to. And he's not a football mind, guys. Everybody knows this. Everybody
I
keeps
mean,
saying it.
no, I don't. I don't think they would lie to him. I mean, you got to understand it. It's the same thing with, we've joked about it before that you can pretty much predict the Tannehill press conference. Same thing with coaches and owners. They're going to say things over and over again. And what they tell us is not necessarily what is said behind closed doors. I mean, for all we know, Adam Gase walked in to talk to Stephen Ross after a couple of days of training camp and said, this team's going to be awful. I'm going to need a new quarterback next year. I'm going to come out and say I'm on Tannehill's side, but I'm going to try to get through it, but we need to look somewhere else. Who knows what to tell them? And Steve Ross is not going to come out and say, well, Adam Gase just told me this. So I don't think they would just intentionally say something, to deceive him. Otherwise, he's the one that signs the paychecks. They will be gone, not him. So, I disagree in the fact that I think the Dolphins are a talented team that could go to the playoffs if they were completely healthy. I think Chad's right with the linebacking positions. Our starting linebackers are good enough to win games. Our starting secondary, good enough to win games, even with Howard in there, because you kind of, you just automatically assume he's going to get beat. He's a rookie. Let's say, they don't have the depth there at those positions, and that's what the problem is. And it's not just there. They don't have depth on the defensive line either. If, Ndamukong Suh's been fortunate enough to be healthy his entire career, what happens if he misses a game or two? Who starts at that defensive tackle position?
Chris Jones.
And it's not – do what?
Chris Jones.
I mean, and that's a major drop-off.
Well, it is, but hang on. I understand what you're saying, and you can continue right after, but I just want to point out that Chris Jones has been very impressive, and in fact, I would be willing to give him the spot over Earl Mitchell. Now, continue.
Well, they play different spots. Earl Mitchell's more of the one tech. He's the kind of the nose tackle position. Same with Jordan Phillips, where Ndamukong Suh is more of your attacking. He's a three tech guy. They don't. If Chris Jones can be that three tech, that's good. I sent a tweet tonight, kind of half joking that it was something about the Panthers and K1 Short haven't reached an agreement. It doesn't look like they're going to reach an agreement. If he was available, I mean, that's a lot of money, but I wouldn't care because, I mean, we need to have you need to have depth at that position, and Miami really does. I mean, the defense is built on the fact that the corner's not going to have to cover long, and the defensive front is going to get pressure, and they're going to take away the need for the linebackers to have to make too many decisions playing the run. They're going to have different gap assignments, and the linebackers are basically just going to see and go. They're not going to have to think as much. And I think it was someone was posted a tweet several weeks ago about it was a game against Dallas, and it showed Kelvin Shepherd, and they ran this play, and the running back for Dallas got a first down or something out of it, and it should have been a tackle for loss. It's Kelvin Shepherd instinctively hits that gap, and he did. And that's a problem that I know even Omar's talked about in the past, is that these linebackers they can make tackles. They just don't seem to have that instinctive nature that lets them hit that gap when they need to, or make that play that they need to without having to think about it for that half second. And so the scheme that we're running, the front that we're running, where the defensive front, the defensive line is going to kind of steal some of those gaps, so linebackers have less responsibility, and that's supposed to help. But if it's all built on Ndamukong Suh, if he gets hurt or goes down, that's the defense. I mean, if Cam Wake, being the freak of nature he is, can stay healthy, and Chris Jones can play at a level of, say, Randy Starks there late in his career, that will be fine, because Cam Wake is a difference maker. He can get in there and do that. But, I mean, everything's built on Suh. He is the guy he is the engine of the defense. And if something happens to him, I mean, it's going to be, we hope Miami's offense can start scoring 50 points a game, because that's what it's going to be like. I mean,
I know what you're saying, Duke, but I mean that's true for every team. If your superstars get hurt, and I realize we don't have somebody that's going to be the caliber of Ndamukong Suh waiting in the wings, but we do have some veteran defensive tackles. Earl Mitchell, is he a Pro Bowler? No. Is he terrible? No. I mean, he's just an average defensive tackle, and you can put him in there and still play football games. My concern in the secondary is we are desperately bleak in the secondary right now. So I'm worried about it. I'm worried you're going to see a lot of pass interference penalties, and you're going to see a lot of big plays down the field on our secondary in this season. So it'll be interesting to see how the coaches respond to that. But I'm worried about. I guess the point I've been hammering home with the training camp is I'm much more worried about our defense than I am our offense, despite our defense looking dominant against our offense. In terms of the preseason, you'll see a little bit. I think people are going to be way too caught up on what Tannehill's doing in the preseason game. I mean, he's probably going to play maybe a series or two, and they're going to be running some basic plays. That to me, that's not that big of a deal. The preseason, the interesting part is going to be the open position battles, and as you mentioned, listen, I've watched this team a long time, and I don't remember this many open positions on the team. I mean, the left guard position is wide open right now. I feel like Billy Turner's winning the right guard, but that's still open. He hasn't won that job outright. So both guard positions are up for grabs. The left cornerback position's obviously up for grabs right now. The starting defensive tackle opposite of Ndamukong Suh is wide open right now. The running back positions, Damian Williams has not made this team for sure. Daniel Thomas could beat somebody like Damian Williams out. And so there's going to be some running back competition, in there. The fifth wide receiver spot's going to be intense competition. So really, I think the second half, despite those usually being more boring, is almost going to be more entertaining, because there's going to be some serious competition going on for this team right now with a lot of open positions.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see the depth that they have at the defensive end position is going to be interesting, because you've got some guys that that could be very good players, possibly even start for some teams, that may get cut. And in my opinion, the ideal situation for the Dolphins would be that Chris McCain can can become an impact player at the defensive end position, and Deion Jordan gets it all put together and becomes an impact player, because those guys are young players and they'll be around for a few years. Worst case scenario is nobody takes it and we're relying on Asian guys, and that's just more needs for next year. To kind of go back to what we were talking about previously, I think it's part of a rebuilding process. They've kind of built some depth on the offense. I think next year will be they just start building depth on the defense. And it'll be in those back end positions. They built a little depth so far on the defensive front, particularly that end position. But I agree. I think there's going to be some interesting battles. It would not surprise me at all to see Tony Lippett play 3 quarters tomorrow night.
Yeah, I wish Howard was healthy, because I would have Lippett and Howard play almost every down of the preseason. They need to be ready to go.
Yeah.
And that goes for Bobby McCain too. I mean, we're again with the Brandon Maxwell, he's got some experience, but Tony Lippett, Xavier Howard, and Bobby McCain have very, very little NFL experience, and we're facing scenarios where 2 of those guys are probably going to be playing a significant amount, and if we have an injury, we could have 3 guys playing that are completely unproven in the secondary. That's kind of unheard of and very risky in the NFL, but. It'll be interesting to watch the position battles regardless in the preseason. And I may catch some flack for this, but I'm not a big Chris McCain fan. I know he's had some good moments here in training camp, but he completely got dominated last year in the preseason playing against, in the fourth quarter and third quarter against second and third string players. And I think he's too small to play a lot of defensive end. Yeah, you can throw him in there in blatantly obvious passing situations, but when you have somebody like Branch and Wake, I mean, unless there's an injury or something, you don't really need him, and he isn't near the physical specimen that Deion Jordan is, and that's a lot of what Chris McCain would bring would be, can he play special teams and can he be a pass rush specialist? But I just, from a talent differential, I don't know. I don't see it. He hasn't been able to play outside or strong side linebacker really. They've played around with him a little there, and so I don't know. I just don't see it. I mean, other than he's a high effort player in camp, but
he is strictly a defensive end, at least in this defense. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker, more so than necessarily a true defensive end. But that's his home. I remember I was at my seats last year in the Carolina game. I actually kind of see his face during a play, and he looks completely lost at linebacker. He just had that look in his eye, like, I have no clue what I'm doing right now. That was a failed experiment for him. I think the move for him to play defensive end is a good one, especially if they're lining up wide, coming at that angle. He's got the speed, he's got the bend. He can get around the tackle and get to the quarterback. The question for him will be, can he hold up against the run at defensive end? Can he get off? Is he going to get manhandled by a tackle in the run game, or is he going to be able to get off his blocks? But I think as an actual rush guy, I think he's got a home there. And I remember it was 2 seasons ago when they played the Rams in preseason, and it was late in the game. I don't know if it was third or fourth quarter, and him and Deion Jordan just kind of met at the quarterback. It was pretty cool. But I think that's his spot now. Deion Jordan, you mentioned his versatility. I think they will list him at linebacker just because they would have possibly an opening there. But I could see him playing defensive end and also being used in certain situations just for coverage purposes. I mean, I'm watching the Patriots right now. They've got Gronk and they've got Martellus Bennett. There's 2 good tight ends that Miami's going to have to figure out a way to cover it. And Deion Jordan can take on one of them. So I think they will use him kind of as a chess piece there. But ultimately, I think his home's a defensive end. If it's true what they're saying, he's up to 275 now or something like that. I mean, you figure some of that's off-season weight. So you figure, once he gets back out there in the heat and starts practicing, he'll trim down to about 268 or something like that, which would be good if he can maintain that athleticism and speed on the outside. That would be just a welcome addition, and hopefully they can use him in that. In my opinion, I would hope he would take snaps away from Andre Branch at the toward as the season goes along. I mean, that's an ideal scenario. A lot of people don't believe he'll contribute anything. That he may get cut or traded or something. I don't know, but I would, that's what you'd like to see, because ultimately he is more talented than Andre Branch, and you like to see him start taking away those snaps and developing into the guy that he was drafted to be.
I don't think you're going to get a lot of snaps out of Deion Jordan this year, unless there's some injuries. I also don't think he's going to get cut. I think they're loaded at the defensive line position right now, and that's why I think it's going to be difficult to keep Chris McCain, just because he's so limited on what he can do. All he can really do is rush the passer. You pointed that out, and I was alluding to that. He's not really capable of playing linebacker. He absolutely isn't big enough to play the run. He'd be a major liability if you put him down in end and expected him to be able to be able to compete in the running game. I think your starting defense is going to be Mario Williams on one side and Andre Branch on the other, and I think they're going to bring Cameron Wake in selectively, especially on passing downs, which to me makes all the sense in the world. Branch and Mario Williams are both big, powerful defensive ends that can also rush the passer, and why not just keep Cameron Wake available so when it's obvious passing downs, you get him completely fresh, going nuts after the quarterback. And so I think he'll cycle in, and I think you've got plenty of depth. You have Terrence Fede, who's, he's not going to be a dominant defensive end, but he's a very capable defensive end. And then I think you'll have Deion Jordan kept on the team to develop. We'll have to get him back from injury and get him teaching the defense. But physically, he's a far superior player to Chris McCain because he is 275 and he can run fast, and he'll be a very beneficial player on special teams this year, I think. And I think that's where that'll fall in. Maybe they'll figure out a roster spot for McCain, but I don't know. He's going to have to really be dominant in the preseason, and he wasn't last year. So it'll have to be a big change over what he was doing last year, because I know he's quick and he can rush the passer, but he just doesn't have the ability to use power moves when these agile tackles get their hands on him. If a tackle gets their hands on Chris McCain, it's over. There's not gonna be anything he can do, and so he's gonna have to move by them, and so that's hard to do in the NFL. So we'll see. I'm not counting him out, but like I said, I just don't see it. I'm more interested in other position battles. I definitely want to watch the running back position. The Damian Williams has been up and down in camp, and Daniel Thomas has been in much better shape, so I'm interested in him. I'm interested to see Drake and where these guys are falling in, because it wouldn't shock me at all if we get to week 3 and both Ajayi and Foster are both hurt. And so I am curious to see what our running back situation is going to play out for the number 3 spot, because I don't know. Obviously, Drake will make the team, but I don't know outside of him who else is going to be competing in there at that running back position. I'm interested to see Grant. I think he's on the bubble more than people. I know he's an exciting player and he's extremely fast, but his hands are very concerning. If he's not able to be a guy you can rely on for punt and kick return, where does he fit on this team? He's nothing but a gimmick player for some snaps here and there on offense, but he's not a guy that you're going to be lining up at wide receiver for maybe more than a few plays a game. And so he has to win that kick return job, I think, to make the team. And so to do that, he cannot be afforded to be dropping punts or kicks, because that loses ball games in a hurry if you muff punts. And so I'm going to be interested to watch how he performs, because preseason games are a step up in pressure, and obviously he's had some drops early on in practice. I know watching Lewis's reporting, he improved on it, but when he gets into the preseason game, the pressure is on Grant, because I think if he fumbles a punt or he drops a couple passes, that may cost him his roster spot. So we'll see how he performs in those situations.
I can't see the Dolphins giving up on Grant so easily. Like I know what you're saying, and it is valid, but the thing that makes me feel otherwise about him getting given the boot is that, like you said, he is exciting, and not only is he exciting, Chad, and yes, he might be a niche player. He could be the Darren Sproles for the team, but there are not a lot of guys who can do what he does. The fact that he is so small, the fact that he is so quick, so elusive. Heck, I wouldn't mind handing him the ball out of the backfield, and that way he can't drop the ball. Just make him a running back, and let's see what happens there. And I did mention, like you said, you brought up my report that he seems to have this intense focus all of a sudden on just making sure the ball is in his hands, at least in practice. I don't know what happened to him. That one practice right near the beginning, he dropped the pass. He stared at the ball for a second, then picked it up, handed it back to the coach, took his helmet off, walked off to the sideline, and just walked around for a while. It's like he was in his own head. From that point on, I have not yet seen him drop another pass, and I don't know if maybe he just snapped, but it seems to have made an improvement. Now, when the lights come on and he's asked, go get that ball, then we'll see if it sticks, because that's going to be the difference. There's always the whole thing of how well do you practice versus how well do you play when the lights come on. And that was supposedly what Tim Tebow did. And by the way, congratulations, question mark, to Tim Tebow for his baseball career. Anyway, moving on from there.
See, I think you can, especially if you're going to be using a lot of these short passing plays. And I know people talked about before training camp, that Gase uses a lot of the screen passes. He uses a lot of these short, quick hitters. That's what you want a guy like Grant for, because number one, he's elusive. And there's a difference between just being fast and being elusive. Mike Wallace.
Yeah, it's like trying to tackle smoke. This guy is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Wallace is super fast. You don't catch Mike Wallace. Well, let's use two actual receivers that are in the league now, established receivers. Mike Wallace is, I think it was Patrick Peterson. There's an article 2 years ago that said that there were two players in the league that had there was fast, there was really fast, and then I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's something like stupid fast. He used some other word I can't remember, but anyway, and it was Mike Wallace and Deshaun Jackson. The difference in those two players is that Mike Wallace is strictly straight line.
Yeah, you corner him, he's done.
Yeah, Deshaun Jackson you couldn't tackle him in a phone booth, and that's, you need guys like that. That was the one thing about Lamar Miller I did not like, was that for his speed, for his vision, everything that he improved in, he's not a good open field runner. He's not a guy that's going to make people miss. He's either tackled or he was going to run through you if he could, but he wasn't really a shifty player. Same thing, Jarvis Landry, I think, tries too hard. I think sometimes he leaves yardage on the field by trying to be shifty.
He does.
I don't know about everybody else.
Okay.
I was going to say, if you're running these screens and running these quick hitters, these little, whatever pass play you've got to get a guy in space, you want a guy that can make other people miss. The best wide receiver screen receiver that I ever watched was Steve Smith, and he came into the league. He was a punt returner. He was a guy that knew how to be elusive, and he could turn. He could hit in the backfield and still get 5 or 6 yards out of it, and that's what you want with these guys. And so I think Grant could be used in that capacity, if nothing else, just to say, hey, we're going to, use him as a decoy at times, but sometimes use him out there and get him open just in space, just to let him use that ability.
The reality is we've got, the team already has clearly 4 receivers that they're going to be playing. It's going to be Landry, Stills, Parker, and Carew. And so it's going to be limited how much Grant gets put on the field.
Well, let me just switch that a little bit. Carew's guaranteed to make the team, but if we're talking about performance, Griff Whalen is wide receiver number 4 right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, though, Lewis, and that's the point I'm making with Grant is the receiving position is stacked right now, and Grant, I understand he's elusive, but he's very small. You can't use him on coverage teams. You can't have him running down the field trying to tackle people. So he's not a special teams contributor in that regard. he's not going to be able to play a lot of downs as a receiver. You can get him in here and there on some plays, but he's just not big enough to have as an every down wide receiver. I just don't see it. And so he has got to win that special teams return job. That will be his primary
He'll win
thing on
it.
the team.
He'll win it. He'll win it.
Well,
There's no way.
I'm telling you, Lewis, if he drops punts and like if he fumbles a couple punts in the preseason game, you cannot rely to bring that guy into the season. See, you lose a football game and that's your season. You can't afford to lose games, and you can't put a guy a kick return that does not have reliable hands. You need to have some of your best hands guy on the team. It doesn't matter how fast he is or how elusive he is. If they drop balls or they muff kicks, that guy cannot be your returner. And so, he's got to beat out Landry and Drake. You got to feel good about him winning that return job. And so the point I'm making is I don't believe Grant has made it the team, and he's got to make that team by performing well in the preseason games. And so I'm going to be watching to see, with all that pressure on him, does he hang on to the football? He can't afford to do turnovers, because I don't think he has the ability to take up a receiver slot on this team right now. Our receiving talent is just too good to say, well, we'll cut Griff Whalen, or obviously we can't cut Carew, or are you going to cut Matt Hazel or a guy like that and put Grant as your like sixth wide receiver, your fifth wide receiver, knowing that
I would cut Hazel.
Right, but you got to think, well, if Parker gets hurt and then Stills gets hurt and suddenly that guy needs to be playing a significant amount of downs, is that something Grant can actually do, is be on the field for, say, 60, 70% of the downs? And I don't know if he can do that. Now, you can feel a lot better if you say, well, he is going to be our returner, so you're maybe giving a roster spot to your returner and he fits in there. But if Grant is not the kick returner, punt returner, I don't see him making the team. Otherwise.
Well, right now, the only other guy competing with him on punt return is AJ Cruz, and I guarantee you he's not making the team.
No, I absolutely agree that Cruz isn't.
Like, all due respect to Cruz, because he was on our show, but sorry, man.
But I could feasibly make an argument that I would be comfortable having Jarvis Landry return punts and having Drake return kick return. I think they would be adequate, and you wouldn't have to give up the roster spot then to somebody like Grant. So Grant has to me, win the job yet. I think he's on the bubble right now, and he's going to stay on the bubble, and so he can't afford to make a lot of mistakes. So the preseason games, he's going to be one of my number one guys to watch, because it's not like, somebody like Ndamukong Suh, you just want him to play a few plays, get out of there, and not get hurt. So the fun in the preseason is going to be watching these guys that are trying to make the team. Another one is Dirtad. I don't know. You haven't really heard you say much about him, Lewis. I know he was kind of in and out with an injury, I believe. But
Dirtad?
Yeah.
Dirtad.
Dirtad. Am I pronouncing his name right? The guy that's from UCLA.
Duarte. Oh.
Name wrong.
He hasn't done anything.
I know, and so my question is he going to be able to make this team? Where is he going to fit in? And so I'm kind of wanting to see what they do with him in the preseason, because obviously the starting two tight ends are going to be Sims and Cameron. Is he going to have a shot at that third tight end spot? Can he can't really break into that wide receiving core, I don't think so.
I think it was going to be Marquise Gray, but then Damian Williams ran him over, and then he got hurt. So
yeah. So
I saw something today that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know that it will happen, but I can't remember who it was that tweeted it, that said they believe that the Dolphins might only carry two tight ends and then use Jermon Bushrod as the third tight end when they go in heavy packages.
That would be a mistake. We
now,
already
don't know.
last year, Duke. That would be I'm just gonna say it right now. That would be a huge mistake if they only went with two tight ends. Last year should have been proof enough why you don't do two tight ends.
Who is the third tight end on the roster though right now, Lewis? That you see?
Yeah, I mean that's he's right. I mean, you don't keep a third guy just to have a third guy.
But a lineman?
Well, no, Lewis, that's going to happen anyway. I mean, when you go into the big package, you're going to pull Jordan Cameron off the field and put a lineman in there. But,
so they're not using him as a tight end. They're using him as the.
Oh, okay. Yes, I get what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, they would use Bushrod as kind of he would play tight end in that package.
But it just means It means he's good enough to lumber out and catch a pass in the flat if they don't at least.
Heck, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't put Laramie Tunsil out there.
Oh
He's
Lord,
already
no.
he caught a touchdown pass in a college game.
Right. Well, I mean,
No.
the reality though is that player almost never catches a pass, so he's just an extra
Yeah.
lineman. But the question it comes as relevant is there enough talent at the third wide receiver position or the third tight end that maybe you don't keep one thinking we don't have a good third tight end anyway. We can just sign one off the street and have the same talent level as we do at the third tight end. And that was why I was making the point about, are you pronouncing his name Duarte? Duarte. That would be a role he could do. Is could he be a third tight end in a pinch and also get some downs in a specialty package? So in my mind, that's a guy, even though he's probably way behind right now, that might be competing with a guy like Jakeem Grant, because they're both guys you could say he could be our sixth wide receiver and we could use him in other ways. And so
If I had to guess right now between those two positions, I would say they would take 6 wide receivers and 2 tight ends, and because Griff Whalen has played well enough that he would fit that slot role that Duarte would probably play.
He's either Rashard Matthews or Brian Hartline in Tannehill's mind.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
so
I think he's a. Sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I think he's a safety valve. You go ahead. You go ahead. I'll stop.
Oh, that's awesome. I just said he's playing well with Tannehill, so that's a huge benefit for Whalen right now. So it seems like Matt Hazel plays better with Matt Moore, and Griff Whalen's playing better with Tannehill, and so
Carew's playing better with Moore too. I have to say it.
Yeah, but I mean, he's got a spot because of his draft status. He's going to make the team regardless, I think, unless he's just horrifically bad. But Carew will make the team even if they have him be the fifth wide receiver, right? I can't say that Whalen has made the team. He's just in the lead right now, I think, because of his rapport with Tannehill. So,
and the problem with Duarte is he's basically just he's a small tight end, a kind of a bigger receiver type.
He's Charles Clay. He's got the Charles Clay body.
Well, except the thing is, Charles Clay came out as a fullback. So, I mean, Charles Clay had the blocking stuff. I mean, I don't know that I would trust Duarte to put him in as a second tight end. Let's say somebody gets hurt. I wouldn't expect him to get in a position where you need him to block. I mean, Charles Clay, you could.
Well, Duke, once Charles Clay came in and started doing stuff with Tannehill, how often was he blocking anyway? Most of the time, he was going out to catch a pass anyway.
Well, I mean, he was the blocking guy on running downs. I mean, he was a guy that could block. So, I guess the concern I would have there would be if he can't play that role and can't be a blocker, can he, is he good enough as a receiver to take a spot away from Griff Whalen? So
right now, no.
So to me, I mean, that's what I'm looking at. Like, I've got my 2 tight ends. If I need an additional blocker, I can bring in some of these offensive linemen that I have. They're pretty athletic. Get them out there at the tight end spot just to block. And I've got my receiving guy, and I've got Griff Whalen to fill that role. So I kind of think he's made the team so far. I mean, he's making plays. He seems to be getting open. He seems to fit what's been going on. And that reminds me of something I was going to tell Chad. I was like, I don't know if it would matter if Jaden Howard was out there or not. Apparently, the cornerbacks aren't getting tested. So,
yeah, but they're going to when we get to the preseason game here.
They may not get tested in practice, so it may not even matter. But
Tannehill won't test them, but I guarantee you, I guarantee you, if Eli hits that field tomorrow, he's going to test them.
Well, I can tell you guys pretty confidently right now, teams are not going to come in, play the Dolphins, and be able to run the football effectively typically because our defensive line is very good. And our linebacking talent's adequate.
Well, hang on, Chad. Hang on. They're good at getting to the quarterback. They haven't done much run defense.
I understand, Lewis. Right now I feel that Mario Williams is a significant upgrade over Olivier Vernon.
Oh yeah, he is.
And I think Andre Branch is going to be just fine in run. They're not going to be easy to control that front line if you're a team. And so you're looking at that and you're like, well, if we're struggling running the football, why are we running the football? If I'm playing the Dolphins, I'm trying to go vertical a lot on our cornerbacks, and just, if anything, try to draw flags on them, try to get interference, because that happens a lot more frequently. You get pass interference penalties when you're playing man press, because if there's a guy gets going, they're right up there on him, and so the 10 things you tend to do is grab his jersey so he doesn't run away from you, and so that's the way I would tack the Dolphins right now is, why would you want to try to pound the ball at Ndamukong Suh and Mario Williams and all these guys when you've got those cornerbacks out there? You want to test them. So they're going to get tested early, and they're going to get tested a lot. And so it'll be interesting to see. But sorry, I'm kind of jumping off topic. I was trying to preview some of the matchups I was looking for. I was touching on
Tomorrow's
Wayland
game
and Hazel in tomorrow's game, because I think the 5th and 6th wide receiver spot's going to be a really hard contested spot with some solid receivers. And I'm also interested in who's the 4th safety that's going to make the team. Obviously, the first 3, Michael Thomas, I assume, will be the backup safety. But I don't know,
Walt Aikens.
It is Walt Aikens against Jordan Lucas. Right now, would you say
Walt
Walt
Aikens.
has
They're
that?
using Lucas as a corner sometimes.
Right, which I think is, something he can play. But
That's going to give him. They're going to both get a spot because of that. Lucas is going to be in there as a corner, and Walt is the 4th safety.
We'll see. That's going to be I don't think either one of those players has made the team yet. I agree with you. I would think Aikens probably has a little bit of an advantage, but that's going to be another player that to me is on the bubble is Jordan Lucas and Walt Aikens. They can't afford to have horrible preseasons either, and so they should be playing very competitive football at that position.
If you had to, I mean, Jordan Lucas may make the team initially if Culliver has to go on the PUP list, but if you add Culliver into the mix, into the regular rotation, you could either keep 10 defensive backs. I don't think Jordan Lucas makes it. I think the guy who does make it is that Chinda Chekwa. He got first team reps. He fits the size category they're looking for, and I kind of figured Jordan Lucas might be in the running for the nickel spot. Except Michael Thomas is taking that spot. So now you've got your 2 corners there for the nickel. You've got Thomas and McCain. The question is the outside guys. And I think Checkle has the advantage over Lucas right now. I think Walt Aikens is the 4th safety. According to the team roster, there's only 6 safeties on the team. Those 4 we mentioned, Shamil, Gary, and is it Wandy? AJ Wandy, is that right? Something like
that could be. I mean, I just consider those guys camp bodies, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see anybody else unless they feel like they need 3 safeties and 7 corners. I just don't see how Aikens doesn't make the team over that, simply because what they've got listed at safety, I can't see anybody taking him over unless they do move Lucas to safety. So
I just kind of point out he's a player that's interesting to watch, and of course Jordan Lucas is a player that wouldn't shock me that ends up on the practice squad or something like that. But he's a player that's gonna be fun to watch, I think, in the preseason. The other battle I think that's very interesting is going to be that defensive tackle spot opposite of Ndamukong Suh. I mean, obviously nobody's going to beat out Sue, but I'm not a big Earl Mitchell fan. I like what he's being paid and what he brings in terms of depth. He's a great player to rotate in.
Let me tell you something, Chad. I already said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again. Chris Jones is being very impressive to me, and Jason Jones too, and they're both cheaper than Mitchell. So if push comes to shove, I would say Mitchell's on the roster bubble, and we can save money with him.
Well, I've got a couple of ideas for the defensive tackle position. The one that I posted on our site the other day is that I don't know what size Trent Fade is currently.
Fade's being used at the defensive end anyway.
Do what?
Fade is almost the exact same size as Derek Shelby.
Fade's being used as an end.
He's an end. I could see them moving him inside of the defensive tackle. He seems to have that size.
Well, they haven't done it yet.
I know there was a lot of talk I've not seen the read about it much since camp, but I know there's a lot of talk about them going to the 4-3 under front, which kind of uses one of your defensive ends as a 5 tech. And I think Terrence today is an ideal 5 tech, in my opinion. I think they will use him in that role. That's just a thought that I have. Like, they can probably bulk him up. He's probably somewhere in the 280 range now.
Fade doesn't need to be any bigger, bro. He's big.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
he
he's a
won't.
tall
He won't be
dude.
an every down D tackle. I mean, he's got some serious competition. What you're talking about there, Duke. I mean, that's something you could feasibly use Deion Jordan as, and that's also something you could feasibly use Mario Williams as well. And so, Fade would possibly make sense there as well, but I don't think he'll factor at all in the defensive tackle battle. I mean, obviously. That's you're talking about specific scenarios when they would do that, but you can't put Terrence Fede in at the other D tackle and expect him to be stout enough to play that position. It's probably going to be between the Joneses and Phillips. I don't think Mitchell is going to be the starting. And it sounds like you agree with me, Lewis. There, Earl Mitchell is not going to be the starting defensive tackle.
If it were up to me, I wouldn't even have Mitchell on the roster anymore. To be perfectly honest,
well,
I could save that money.
I don't know how that works on the cap and what they've paid him already. And
$2.5 million if we cut him
today. Is that? Because I don't know when he got bonuses and
That's
stuff.
cap savings, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that could be a consideration, but I still think he's a decent rotational defensive tackle that you can bring in. If you're resting some guys, I just don't think he's going to be the starter. But that's still up in the air whether or not Jordan Phillips is going to be the starter or not. Because everything I hear out of him is he's up and down, and
I still say Chris Jones.
That obviously it won't matter a whole lot, in that they'll be rotating anyway. I think whoever plays that position, but that's going to be a battle to watch here in the preseason, because that's an open job right now, is that spot opposite. And Jones, Phillips, and Jones, Jones, and Phillips and Mitchell are all vying for that spot. And
we have a lot of Jones. Have you anybody noticed that? Rashad Jones, Dominique Jones, Jason Jones, Chris Jones. Like, we're gonna need
that's where your feedback comes in from me in camp, Lewis. Because if you probably went to ESPN, they'd look at the paper and they would probably think Earl Mitchell right now was going to be the opposite. But right now, your opinion based on what you're seeing is Chris Jones may be in the lead
by far. If it were me, Chris Jones is a starter today.
So, and that we'll get to see that firsthand tomorrow night. That'll be something to keep an eye on. Is how does Chris Jones play and how does Jordan Phillips play?
Yep. So.
Well, and see, he kind of plays that same spot that Sue does, so it'll be interesting how they line him up. But I want to make a case for a player, and whoever's listening to the show will hear this and probably think I'm crazy. But I think Daniel Thomas has a legitimate shot to make this roster.
Don't say stuff like that in public.
Here's why. Here's why I say that. Number one, well, first, one of the writers, it may have been Antoine Staley, posted a Instagram video of the running backs doing a little ladder drill. And the first to go was Jay Ajayi. And he was the slowest of the bunch. And just his footwork.
How about Arian Foster?
Thank you. I just forgot that. Arian Foster was last. He had probably the smoothest footwork. But there was another fact. But I watched Daniel Thomas. I watched this Instagram video for like 10 times just to watch Daniel Thomas, and his footwork looks very good. It actually looks better than Ajayi in that drill. That doesn't mean anything because it's a drill.
Yeah.
But the drill was, if you watched Foster and used him as the kind of your standard by what you gauge it by, the feet always had to keep moving. Ajayi is kind of like, it was, I don't know, kind of hesitant motion, whereas Daniel Thomas's feet continually moved. But the reason I think he can make this team is because where he fails as a runner, I mean, he'll have that one game like he did against Pittsburgh, have a big run, but then he'll have another game where he seems to run to darkness. But for that, he is not that bad as a receiver out of the backfield. And if you're going to be running an offense that is predicated on short passing, getting the running backs in space, he's not that bad. For a guy his size, he's kind of shifty. he was the guy that when Darrell Reeves hurt his knees, he was the guy that juked him. He had when he played for the Dolphins 2 years ago, when he played against the Raiders, he had a screen pass touchdown that was called back due to some penalty, but he got out in the open field and made a guy miss. I remember his very first play in preseason back in 2010 or 2011. He drops the ball off to him on the sideline, and he gets like 20 yards, making people miss down the sideline. I was like, back then nobody knew, and they're like, oh, this guy's going to be good. But I could see him playing a part in this offense due to that. Now, the obstacles he has to overcome is, number one, you're not going to cut Foster or Ajayi. That's not happening. They're not cutting Drake. If Drake starts the season on the IR designated return like they did Ajayi, which I think would be a mistake, but if that happens, he could get the third spot pretty easy. The question for him is, can he play special teams well enough to beat out Damian Williams? I think blocking-wise, I know Omar talks about that Damian Williams can block really well, and that's a good thing. And I like Damian Williams. I think he's a better runner than Daniel Thomas. I don't know that he's necessarily a better receiver than Daniel Thomas.
He's a better receiver. Trust me on this. In fact, I think he's a better receiver than he is a running back. They certainly used him like that.
I agree with you on that, Lewis. I think Damian Williams. The issue I'll just throw in as you're covering this, Duke. The issue is Damian Williams showed up out of shape. He showed up overweight, and it rubbed Adam Gase the wrong way. And he showed up in the doghouse.
He got the Noshan Moreno treatment.
He did, and what that did is it opened the door. And so where I was going with that is in this preseason game is Damian Williams and Daniel Thomas are in an open competition. Damian Williams opened that door by showing up to camp out of shape, and Daniel Thomas showed up in very good shape. And so if Daniel Thomas can have success, against third and fourth string players, which he'll be going up against, I think he can beat Damian Williams out. And I don't say he's got it in the bag or anything, but I think it's going to be a matchup to watch because Damian Williams and Daniel Thomas both have attributes, and it's an important position because all the three guys in front of them, Foster, Ajayi, and Drake, are all injury issues. They all
watch
have
for Isaiah Peed though. Peed is actually doing pretty well.
Peed. He'll be another interesting one in that mix. Because I think those three players, only one of them is going to – I don't think they're going to keep 5 running backs.
I wasn't even sure they'd keep 4.
Well, yeah, I guess that could be questionable. But with the injury history, it's going to be interesting. But obviously Drake, Ajayi, and Foster are going to be the 3 that make it, and they're going to be the 3 getting carries if they're all healthy. But that fourth back is going to be an intense competition to pay attention for in the preseason. But I had forgot about Pede. So, Lewis, again, you being at camp, do you think Pede is ahead of Williams or Thomas?
He's not ahead of Williams. Williams right now is firmly number 3, but Pede and Thomas, it's pretty much a toss-up. Okay. So right now, Pede and Thomas are the ones competing, not Williams.
Well, I'll throw this out here that with the propensity of the running backs ahead of these guys to be injured, if you had to go into a game and you had your pick of a guy that you wanted to start at running back and you feel comfortable giving him 15 to 20 carries, would you take Williams, Pede, or Daniel Thomas? I would take Daniel Thomas. And that's coming from somebody who's watched him play, who did not like him. He had, all of them had their moments, but I think he overall, for that position, I think he is overall a better talent than those other guys.
He'll probably have to pass based on kind of what Lewis is telling me where the reps are. The job is going to be Damian Williams is to lose.
It is.
But if Damian Williams does something like just doesn't really do much, or lays the ball on the ground a couple times, something like that.
If he starts to blow it, then maybe. But right now, Williams is running harder than I've ever seen him because he's trying to make up for lost time.
Yeah, he started in the doghouse. There's no doubt about that. So, yeah, it's
something. I don't think Daniel Thomas will make the team.
Yeah, I know.
He can, though. And like I said, Don't be surprised if they use him tomorrow night. He comes in third quarter, gets the backups to the backups, and they do a little dump off pass and he gets 50 yards out of it. I mean, he was a second round pick. He's talented.
All right.
It's just the problem with him was his overall. If he had, and he wasn't necessarily a power running back. That's what I think people wanted him. He was the Thunder to Reggie Bush's Lightning in 2011, or supposed to be. But if he could have developed vision the way that Lamar Miller developed his vision, Daniel Thomas would have been a good back, not a starter, not great, not a star, not a Pro Bowl or anything. He would have just been a good, guy to work in your rotations. You could feel comfortable giving 15 carries a game if you needed to. He just never did develop that vision. For every one time he would hit that hole and do something, the next time he would run into a pile of bodies, and it was maddening to watch. So I don't know. I always root for the underdog. I would like to see him improve and make the team. It would be a nice touch.
Well, we'll see what happens. So we're gonna go ahead and call it a night. We got a long day ahead of us tomorrow, and Dolphins fans, be prepared because we're gonna get to see, at least for a couple of drives, I would assume, starting offense, starting defense. Let's see if I don't even know if Eli Manning is gonna play. If he does, well, let's see what he decides to pick on. So I'm sure he's not quite his brother, but he does have some brains in him. So we'll see what happens. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank my co-host Chad Ronenbaum, and of course my good friend Chris Early, otherwise known as Duke. So we'll see you all next time for another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. And good night, everyone.